You're a loser. I really wish Sylvia was my only mother. My daughter Paige's words cut through the dining room air like a serrated knife. We were in the middle of Sunday dinner. I had spent 4 hours standing in front of the oven, roasting a perfect prime rib and making sure every detail of the table setting was flawless. Sitting directly across from me was Sylvia, the mother of my son-in-law, Gavin. Sylvia was wearing a silk blouse and a smug little smirk that she didn't even bother trying to hide. Gavin, meanwhile, just kept slicing his meat as if the insult hurled at me was nothing more than background noise on the TV. Paige raised her wine glass filled with a $60 Cabernet I had paid for and looked at her mother-in-law with pure devotion. You actually know how to live, Sylvia. You have class, not like my mother, who's perfectly content just cleaning and serving. Honestly, it embarrasses me sometimes. The dining room fell into a suffocating silence. They fully expected me to lower my eyes. They expected that. Just like always. I would swallow the lump in my throat, quietly gather their dirty plates, and retreat to the kitchen to cry in peace. I had been living with them for 5 years since my husband passed away, taking on the role of live-in nanny, private chef, and personal ATM, genuinely believing that if I just helped enough, I would earn their love. But that night, something inside me snapped. I didn't feel a wave of sadness, and I didn't feel the urge to scream. I just felt an absolute, ice-cold, and incredibly liberating clarity. I set my silver spoon down on the table. It didn't make a sound. I looked Paige dead in the eyes. I didn't see a trace of the sweet little girl I had raised. I just saw an entitled woman completely consumed by keeping up appearances. I nodded slowly, wiped my hands with my cloth napkin, and stood up. "Enjoy your dessert," I murmured, my voice totally flat. I turned around and walked down the hallway. I heard Sylvia let out a muffled giggle behind my back, and Paige muttered something about my total lack of a spine. They thought I was running to my bedroom to hide under the covers. They were dead wrong. I was going to grab my suitcases. I shut my bedroom door and pulled 2 large suitcases down from the top shelf of the closet. I didn't shed a single tear. At 68 years old, Lorraine Sterling had done enough crying over people who took her for granted. I was methodical. I packed my clothes, my shoes, and my toiletries. Then, I opened the small digital safe hidden in the back of my closet. I took out my important documents, the deed to the property, and most importantly, my checkbooks and bank security tokens. As I folded my favorite sweater, I took a look around the room. This wasn't their house. It was mine. I had allowed Paige and Gavin to move in to save up for a down payment, while I relegated myself to the small guest bedroom. I had confused unconditional love with endless sacrifice. I had built them a beautiful, comfortable pedestal, and once they were standing on it, they decided to look down and spit on me. I grabbed my purse and my spare keys. I wasn't going to throw a fit. I wasn't going to kick them out into the street that night or give Sylvia the satisfaction of a dramatic screaming match where she could play the victim. I owned a small, modest condo across town that I'd bought a few years back as an investment property, and it had been sitting empty for months. I shot a quick text to my best friend Diane, letting her know I was moving out that night. Then, I slipped out the back door while they were still in the dining room laughing and popping the cork on another bottle from my private wine reserve. I climbed into my SUV, started the engine quietly, and drove off into the dark. The cool night air blowing through the window felt like I was taking my first real breath in years. Sure, I had left my daughter with the big house, but I was taking all the invisible pillars that held her lifestyle together right along with me. She was about to find out the hard way that magic isn't real. I woke up to the morning sun filtering through the blinds of my downtown condo. There were no kids screaming, no complaints about what was for breakfast, and no demands for someone to iron a dress shirt. I brewed a pot of black coffee and sat out on my little balcony to soak in the absolute silence. At 8 a.m. sharp, my cell phone started buzzing on the patio table. It was Paige. I let it ring 3 times before answering with a completely relaxed tone. "Mom!" Her voice was a grating mix of annoyance and confusion. "Where are you? I went out to the garage and the SUV is gone. Sylvia and I have a spa appointment in 30 minutes and Gavin already took his car to work." I smiled into my coffee mug. The SUV was the family car. It was the shiny, late-model vehicle Paige drove every day to flex on her suburban friends. But the title, the insurance, and the maintenance were all 100% in my name. "I'm at my new apartment, Paige, and my car is here with me," I replied. "What? What are you talking about? I need the car. I can't put Sylvia in an Uber. That's humiliating," she demanded, her voice jumping an octave. "The vehicle is my property. Honey, I need it to get around. You'll just have to figure something else out." "You can't do this. We have plans," she shrieked. "Last night, you made it very clear that you only wanted Sylvia as your mother. So, starting today, Sylvia is your only concern. Have a lovely day at the spa." I hung up before she could sputter out a response and flip my phone to silent. I just pictured Paige standing in the driveway with her designer handbag, having to explain to her beloved, high-class mother-in-law why they were going to be waiting on the curb for a rideshare. It was a minor logistical hiccup, but it was the very first brick I pulled out of her castle of illusions. Noon rolled around with a sense of peace I had honestly forgotten existed. I decided to open my laptop and log into my online banking portal. It was time for a financial deep clean. For years, I had let Paige keep an authorized user credit card linked directly to my main account. The original excuse was that it was for household emergencies, but over time it had quietly morphed into her personal slush fund for expensive clothes, $150 lunches, and whatever random impulses she had. Gavin made a decent salary, but they lived way beyond their means, entirely propped up by my financial safety net. With 3 simple clicks, I canceled the authorized card. The screen flashed a green checkmark, "Operation successful." I shut the laptop and went to water my houseplants. At 2 p.m., my phone screen lit up with an absolute avalanche of text messages. "Mom, what is wrong with the card?" "I'm at the bistro with Sylvia, and it just declined." "Mom, answer me. This is mortifying. The waiter is literally staring at me." I read the notifications without blinking. I didn't reply right away. I let her sweat for a good 10 minutes before sending back a single sentence. "The card was canceled this morning. Your finances and your fancy lunches are no longer my responsibility." A minute later, a voice memo popped up. Paige sounded frantic, furious, and totally out of breath. She yelled that she'd had to transfer money out of Gavin's savings account to cover the astronomical lunch bill, and that he was going to completely lose his mind. She accused me of being petty and vindictive over a harmless little comment at dinner. I listened to the whole audio clip, swiped the notification away, and calmly made myself a turkey sandwich. She still didn't get it. She thought this was just me throwing a tantrum, a temporary punishment that would end as soon as I got lonely, and came crawling back. She didn't understand that I wasn't mad. I had just permanently turned off the tap, and that embarrassing lunch was only the beginning. Monday morning marked the dawn of true reality for my daughter. I was usually up by 5:30 a.m. to get a hot breakfast ready and tidy the kitchen before anyone else even opened their eyes. On top of that, I personally paid the weekly wages for Marta, the housekeeper who came in to do the heavy, deep cleaning. That morning, I gave Marta a call. I briefly explained that I had moved out and offered to keep paying her exact same salary if she just came to clean my small condo twice a week. I told her she could take the rest of the week off, fully paid, for the remainder of the month. Marta, who had seen firsthand exactly how they treated me for years, accepted the offer without a second thought. Over at the big house, the chaos didn't take long to erupt. Paige sent me an angry text at 9 a.m. "Why isn't Marta here yet? The house is a wreck. Sylvia has friends coming over for lunch, and Gavin doesn't have any clean dress shirts." I texted back, "I paid Marta out of my own pocket. If you want her to work for you, you'll need to contact her, hire her, and pay her yourself." The sudden lack of maid service hit them like a freight train. Paige, who literally never lifted a finger around the house, suddenly found herself drowning in crusty dishes from Sunday's dinner, piles of wrinkled laundry, and a mother-in-law demanding her morning coffee. Sylvia, far from offering to help, just planted herself on the living room sofa, complaining loudly that her coffee was lukewarm and that the side tables were dusty. Gavin did his part, too, screaming at Paige right before he left for the office because his clothes weren't ironed. The all-inclusive resort bubble they had been living in was rapidly deflating. I didn't even have to lift a finger to ruin their day. My simple absence was more than enough to make their entire lifestyle collapse. By Tuesday afternoon, I was thoroughly enjoying a mystery novel on my balcony when my phone rang. It was Mr. Henderson, the owner of the upscale local butcher shop where I placed a premium meat and grocery order every single week. "Lorraine, how are you? I've got your prime ribeyes and the imported cheeses boxed up for the week. Should I send the delivery boy over to the house as usual?" he asked cheerfully. "No, Mr. Henderson. Actually, please cancel that order and all the future ones as well. I don't live there anymore." I replied, thanking him for his years of great service. I made similar calls to the organic produce delivery and the premium water jug service. That evening, I heard through the grapevine Diane's daughter is in the same social circle as Paige about the absolute meltdown that took place at the house. Gavin came home from a long day at the office fully expecting the gourmet, home-cooked meal he was accustomed to. Paige confidently opened the massive stainless steel refrigerator, only to find half a dried-up lemon, a jar of Dijon mustard, and some questionable leftovers. Panicking, Paige actually begged Sylvia to help her scrape together a meal with whatever was left in the dry pantry. Sylvia just looked at her with pure disgust and informed her that she was an honored guest in that house and hadn't flown across the country to get her hands greasy over a stove. They ended up having to order greasy fast food. Gavin, incredibly frustrated by the unexpected hit to his wallet and the garbage dinner, got into a screaming match with Paige right there in the kitchen. Gavin's paycheck simply couldn't stretch to cover the extravagant lifestyle I had been subsidizing. The tension in that house was boiling over, and Paige's vision of Sylvia as the elegant, perfect mother was beginning to shatter right before her eyes. I just watched the fallout from the quiet comfort of my new home. Thursday rolled around, and I knew the timing was absolutely perfect. Paige and Gavin would be chained to their desks at the office, and Sylvia had a long, expensive salon appointment that would tie her up all morning. I hired 2 professional movers with a box truck and drove over to what was, on paper, still my property. I unlocked the front door with my keys. The place smelled horribly stale, and there were greasy pizza boxes stacked on the coffee table. I didn't pause to clean up their mess. I just directed the movers with laser precision. "Grab the espresso machine from the kitchen counter, please. Roll up the Persian rug in the living room. Oh, and carefully take down the 75-inch smart TV from the main wall. I wasn't looting the house. I was simply reclaiming the luxury items I had purchased with my own hard-earned savings to make their lives more enjoyable. I also boxed up my fine china, took the high-end vacuum cleaner, and had them load up the expensive leather recliner Gavin always fell asleep in. I left them the basic, cheap furniture they had brought with them, just enough to sit on, but I surgically removed every single trace of luxury from that home. Before I walked out, I left a plain sticky note on the kitchen island. I took my belongings. Keep the house clean. I locked the front door behind me and walked away, feeling a massive, suffocating weight lift off my shoulders. There were no dramatic screaming matches, no flying insults, no need to involve lawyers, just clear, undeniable actions. When Paige walked through the door that evening, her living room was going to look like a half-dismantled theater set. The message was loud and clear. Luxury doesn't just magically fall from the sky. It has a name. It has a receipt. And she had just deeply insulted the woman holding the purse strings. The blowback was instantaneous. My phone rang off the hook that night, but I ignored every single call. The next morning, I woke up to a massive wall of text messages from Paige. She was lashing out, telling me that Sylvia was incredibly offended by the missing television and the fact that she had to sit on a stiff, cheap sofa. According to what I found out later, Sylvia had finally taken her mask off. Deprived of the high-end luxuries she blindly assumed were the result of her son's success, she started ruthlessly criticizing every little thing. She told Paige to her face that she was a garbage housewife, that she clearly had no idea how to take care of a man, and that the house looked like an absolute pigsty. Paige, who was physically exhausted from having to clean after working all day, incredibly stressed about money bleeding from their accounts, and thoroughly humiliated by the constant belittling from her idol, finally snapped. She yelled at Sylvia to get off her high horse and at least wash her own coffee mug. Sylvia played the ultimate victim. She acted deeply wounded, threw a massive tantrum, locked herself in the guest bedroom, and immediately called Gavin at work to sob about his wife's cruel abuse. Gavin, predictably, took his mommy's side. Paige was left standing totally alone in the middle of a messy, half-empty living room. Suddenly, the perfect, classy mother she had wished for had morphed into an entitled, toxic nightmare. And the loser mother, who was supposedly only good for cleaning and cooking, turned out to be the sole engine keeping her entire life running. Paige was teetering right on the edge of a total breakdown, just in time for the end of the month. The last day of the month always brings a brutal dose of reality. Historically, I was the one who quietly paid the HOA fees, the electric bill, the gas, and the water. This time, I had the utilities send the paper bills directly to the house's mailbox. Paige ripped open the envelopes, and sheer panic set in. The total balances added up to a number she and Gavin simply did not have in their checking account, especially since Gavin had blown through his latest paycheck covering credit card debts and trying to keep his mother entertained. When Paige desperately asked Gavin for the money to keep the lights on, he screamed at her, insisting it was my house, so it was my responsibility to pay the utilities. Sylvia capitalized on the screaming match to pack her bags, dramatically announcing that she couldn't possibly stay in a poverty-stricken war zone, and demanded Gavin buy her a first-class flight back home immediately. At 11 p.m., my cell phone rang. It was Paige. This time, I decided to pick up. "Mom!" Her voice was violently shaking, completely broken by heavy sobbing. "Mom, please." Sylvia left. Gavin is furious and he locked himself in the bedroom. We just got a final shut-off notice for the power. I don't have the money. Mom, the house is a complete disaster. Please, please just come back. I'm begging you. I am so sorry for what I said. I was just being stupid. I listened to her sob through the speaker. It was the distinct sound of a woman who had finally slammed face first into a brick wall of reality. She had lost her fancy car, her free luxuries, her private maid, and the elegant mother-in-law she had practically worshipped. She was left with absolutely nothing, exactly as I had designed it. I leaned back against my chair and looked out the window at the glowing city skyline. I didn't feel an ounce of pity, but I didn't feel cruel either. I just felt rock solid. Paige, listen to me very closely, I said, speaking with a calm authority that stopped her crying dead in its tracks. You were incredibly clear at that dinner. You looked at me, called me a loser, and said you wished Sylvia was your only mother. I simply granted your wish. Mom, I was just being an idiot. She sobbed into the receiver. No, you were saying what you actually felt because you thought I was a sure thing. I interrupted her, my voice gentle but firm. I gave you my home, my money, and my time. In return, I was openly humiliated at my own dining table. I am not doing it anymore. What am I supposed to do about these bills? They're literally going to shut off the power. You'll have to pay them. You are both adults. If you want to continue living in my house, starting on the 1st of next month, you will be paying me fair market rent to cover the baseline costs. If you can't afford that, you'll need to pack up and find an apartment that actually fits your budget. But I am never coming back there to be anyone's maid ever again. There was a heavy, suffocating silence on the line, followed by a shaky exhale. I could practically feel her nodding in defeat from miles away. Paige finally knew I wasn't bluffing. There were going to be no more magical bailouts. Good night, Paige, I said, and calmly ended the call. There were no dramatic, movie-style reconciliations and no fake tears. By the following week, Gavin was forced to sell his flashy designer watch just to cover their immediate debts. And Paige finally had to learn how to scrub her own kitchen floors. As for me, I brewed a hot cup of chamomile tea and curled up on my sofa with a good book. At 68 years old, for the first time in a very long time, my life belonged entirely to me. And I had never felt so incredibly light. In the end, I learned that true dignity doesn't require you to make a scene or plot some elaborate revenge. Sometimes, it's just about quietly packing up and removing yourself from places where your worth isn't valued. For years, I confused unconditional love with a relentless obligation to fix their lives, totally forgetting that you absolutely cannot buy respect with endless sacrifice. When we finally stop funding our own disrespect and draw a hard, uncompromising line, we aren't being cruel. We are simply stepping aside so that reality can step in and be the brutal teacher we couldn't bring ourselves to be. You can't control it if people underestimate you or take you for granted, but you always retain the power to grab your keys, lock the door behind you, and boldly choose your own peace. Outline.